This is one of the locations where we did a CE-5 with CE-5 Aotearoa in New Zealand. And this is Kevin Honnen, who decided to stay after the CE-5 and sleep under the stars. He's going to answer my 3 questions. So Kevin, we're sitting here in New Zealand on this beautiful mountaintop.
Gorgeous.
Where you have just spent the night sleeping on the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was fantastic.
I bet it was.
Yeah, it was a bit windy, but I was sheltered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Night sky was absolutely amazing last night.
Yeah, it was.
So tell me, what is your advice for anybody that is just starting with ET contact work?
I think my advice would be to keep going with it. Like, do 5 CE5s before you make any sort of judgment calls to what you're doing. There are a lot of subtleties to this process, and there are things that you will learn that will allow you to experience things that aren't subtle at all. And you may or may not get lucky your first time doing CE5 and have a major event or something that's obvious, but you may not. It may take some time. So I think just give yourself some breadth to work with.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's easy to just try something and give up the first time if it doesn't turn out exactly the way you hoped or thought that it would.
Yeah. And honestly, this movement is deeper than that. So it's important to give it that space.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. This is not just about going out and just getting a UFO sighting.
Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Although, I think I would say that they show up 80 to 85% of the time that I've done CE5. Maybe even 90%. Quite often is there some sort of contact made.
Yep.
Something that can be differentiated from satellites or planes or phenomenon. So
yeah, those are pretty good odds for people just
pretty
starting
good
out, who do want to have that confirmation, right? Like when you're first starting out, it's so important. Not really when you're more experienced, it's kind of like going out and having a quiet night. It's fine because you feel like you know that they're there and you know that you've seen them and your faith is pretty strong.
Yeah.
Cool, that's good advice. So what would your average CE5 look like?
It does vary to some degree between groups. What I'm accustomed to is we find the meeting spot, which is somewhere hopefully secluded outside of a town, as far outside of town as you can get. But it's also not necessary. So wherever you're going to meet, we meet up. While we're setting up the chairs, we will put on the tones and just have that as a sort of tone setter for the evening. And we'll do a check-in personally, just what we're coming in and leaving off to participate in the CE5 on a personal level. And then some sort of prayer or dropping into a deeper level of experience. So that's usually expressions of gratitude, expressions of our intention. These are verbal. After that, we'll move into a meditation, and that can be either led by a group member or on the app. There are meditations from Stephen Greer that are recorded. It can be silent too. You can just go straight into CTS, coherent thought sequencing. And in that space is generally where we're projecting our thought beacon, so to speak. So we are projecting our intention for contact in whatever way is safe and possible and appropriate for that moment. So doing all of that together, that's dropping into that space is somewhat of the heart of it. And then after that, we're usually in silent observation until something happens and we are not silent about it. So we respond. If something happens, we'll ask them for a response. So phenomenon typically takes place, and then we'll typically take a break and then do another meditation, sort of repeat those steps again. and just feel out how the night goes. Sometimes it's just too cold, or it doesn't feel right, like no contact's being made. Sometimes it feels really good to drop into longer meditations and just to experience the group itself, outside of any ET activity. And from there you just see how it goes, and at some point it feels appropriate to close, so you give gratitude again and close out, wrap up.
That's nice that you mentioned the group experience, because there's so much comfort that you can find with people who are seeking and questioning, and who are not maybe kind of holding to the current mainstream worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's an important piece. I mean, outside of making contact with ETs, just coming out into nature and being in a circle and being with friends of a like mind and sharing the intention of peace and gratitude and love and goodwill toward each other and towards the earth and toward all beings, that's a meditative practice. It's a ritual. And I think most of us are starved for ritual, so that can be something that's very easily accessible. It's not woo-woo really at all. All this is as scientific as we can make it, but it does include, things that are like energy or experiences that are beyond explanation. But that practice of being in the group itself is really beautiful and really enjoyable, completely aside from making contact, which is also phenomenal. A pretty big deal, as you might imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What would your usual experiences be for sightings or confirmation?
So most of the time I have experienced, and I think most people would experience...
There goes a rock. At least it's not one of us.
Falling down a mountain. No, I think most of the time you're going to see a phenomenon that's in the sky. So probably most common are flash bulbs or some sort of light directed at you with some sort of response or change of direction. So there's a number of things that you'd want to see to make sure you're not looking at a satellite. Satellites are simple, essentially. They'll move in one trajectory. If they are flashing you, so to speak, it's going to happen in a repeating pattern that's of the same rate, because it's the solar panels. Solar panel satellites. Solar panels rotating into the reflection, into a position where they're reflecting the sun at a consistent rate. So that's pretty much a satellite. There are iridium flares, which is the same phenomenon, just faster.
They're not around anymore. They actually pulled them down and put new ones up. And that
there are no iridium flares anymore?
There's no iridium flares anymore.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Well, fancy that.
Which is nice.
Northern and southern hemispheres?
Yeah, it's gone. Like, the company totally replaced them all.
Oh, wow.
Which is nice, because then when people that have seen an iridium flare, and I was lucky to see one in California, when I was at Mount Shasta, if you see that and you know what that's like, and then you see something like that now, you know that's ET.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing out there now that will shine like an iridium flare.
That just makes the scene clearer.
Yep.
Yeah. So what you might see with ET phenomenon is if you're looking at a craft that is a consistent light, it may change direction. That's a clear yes. The flashes, if it's not changing direction but it's flashing in different ways, then that it can be what offers verification is if that's in response to questions you're asking, or if it's in a clear pattern that is not like a satellite. So like flash, flash, flash. Satellites don't do that. The level of brightness is a way to understand what you're looking at. Like our first night, we had a light that was literally offensively bright, offensive to the eyes. Glorious to see, but was like a flashlight, like
wow,
changing your night vision. or affecting it. And that also was directed straight at our group. So that kind of response, that can't be anything else.
Yep, for sure.
And clearly it wasn't a helicopter. It was, you have to look at the position in space, in the atmosphere. It was up there, but not too far up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of offensive bright light, do you want to move a little bit because you've got your eyes covered?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. We've seen enough of this view. We can maybe just move it over this way. Does that feel okay?
Yeah, that seems
we can
good.
just talk to the camera.
Yeah.
So the last question is, what's your story? What brought you to this? Why do you do this? And if you have any of your own standout experiences that you want to share.
Okay. So, I'm a history and economics major. So I'm taking a wide-angle lens on the world and essentially trying to figure out what has been going on and what I can do to help. So that was in college, and then after college I spent a long time just continuing research in a number of different areas: education, integral theory, healthcare industry, politics, more in the economy, finance. And it's a fairly dark picture. A number of bad things are going on. So there's a lot to fix. And in that, I met a group of people who was speaking very fluently about this work, CE-5 and Dr. Greer, the Disclosure Project. And my first reaction was, "You guys are crazy. This is crazy." But I walked away from that with a list of things to look up and a list of questions, very basic questions. And one of them was just plain and simple, do ETs exist? And one of the first pieces that I looked up was the Disclosure Project. The project put together by Stephen Greer in, 2001, yeah. I believe, 2001. And the credibility of the witnesses involved in that really prove that yes, there's a lot of high-level people who just have tremendous credibility and no reason to lie, and they're speaking to these phenomena, their involvement with projects of advanced technology and ETs. So that really was the kicker. I continued research for a long time, and I did eventually participate in an expedition with Stephen Greer. And that was the first time I made contact in real time, with my own personal experience. And that really changed things. That really cemented it. It was somewhat theoretical even up to that point. Once you have that experience, there really is no going back, because it cements the reality of this phenomenon, the ET phenomenon, and also the related issues of the history of advanced technology development by humans and the suppression of that technology, and also just the reality of it and what would be possible if that technology was used for peaceful purposes and made entirely public. So all of that becoming a very real picture is cause for activism. So from there I've gotten into CE-5, formed a group in Minneapolis, and continue to work with as a volunteer in various capacities. So, yeah. And in terms of experiences, I've had many. I think I've made contact 20, 30 times at this point. Many stand out. I will mention, just that our second time out in Minneapolis, it was toward the end of winter, but still quite cold. I think it was about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. we were out and we're typically in a circle formation to give a full view of the sky, but it was too cold to do that, so we were using the cars as a wind block. So we were in a line behind those cars, behind them to the wind, facing one direction, and we had ground level contact. So what happened is there was it was very overcast as well, and then an equilateral triangle punched its way through the clouds, and that was sign number one. And then the trees around us, some of them moved in a way that was different than the others, meaning not the wind. They moved in a unique way. I would describe them as lasers, except they were truncated. They were each about 10 feet long. They were both vertical. The first was about 5 feet off the ground. The second was about 10 feet off the ground. And each of them, they were about 15 feet long. So this is just strange phenomenon for light structures. The first one was white. The second one was purple. Our response was to be peaceful and open and inviting. We knew to open our hands, such as this. I can't do it really sitting down, but standing up, palms open, heart open, and just communing with them as best as we could in that moment. And one of my partners there that night was touched on his face as well. So he thought it was rain, but there was no rain. So a number of things happening at ground level. And so, that I would mention that story as one among many that definitely stands out. But there's been so many times that very, very direct contact, like just a few days ago, being essentially beamed by the light in the sky that was so bright and clearly directed at us, at our group, out in the middle of a lot of land. Not a helicopter, not anything like that. So there's really so many opportunities for incredible events to take place. It's really just a matter of going and getting out and seeing what happens.
Awesome. Those are great experiences. Thank you for sharing them.
They've been a lot of fun.
Before we finish up this interview, I thought it was worth adding in Kevin's thoughts on approaching CE-5 from a scientific standpoint. Okay, so what were we just talking about? Just about the difference between, your outlook, which is...
Difference of approach.
A scientific outlook.
Yeah, I'm coming from more of, I would say, limited to rationality, assuming a framework of pre- and rational and post-rational thought. Trans-rational is another word. But I've come to this really wanting to answer simple questions and then get results. It's very results-oriented, scientifically oriented, and I proceed with a lot of skepticism.
And it can be scientific, right? And it can also be
Very
totally
much so.
spiritual. And
It can be both, absolutely. Yeah, there are other people who take a purely intuitive, experiential view, and they also have a role. Those people often have a really important role in the creation of a CE-5 event and getting things done, and the experience of it all. So there isn't one way to do this at all. There are several important ways you can approach it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So even now I proceed with a lot of skepticism, but I think it's important to differentiate or just be clear about that. Usually people talk about skepticism when what they're doing is it's actually just doubt. Skepticism is an open mind, but a critically thinking mind.
Yeah, that's a great definition.
That's very, very different. And skepticism is not just throwing shade on anything that could be possible. That's doubt, and it's just boring, honestly. So that's the way to go. And even at these events, you know, it's typical for some people to see some things and other people in the group to see other things. Some events everyone sees are quite obvious, but we are tuned to different realities, very much so, and that will let you experience that reality in real time. So if this is my orientation, where I'm skeptical, where I'm research oriented, I'm results oriented, that's really what I'm going to get, and it's also what I'm not going to get. So you have to negotiate that in a group where you're coming together with people with very different approaches who are having experiences. Like, it would be typical for people to be sensing or feeling or seeing things, and I'm not seeing those things. There's so many things that happen in a CE-5 event. Typically, I'm seeing plenty of other things. So I'm not missing out entirely, but I'm missing out on these pieces, and I have to negotiate why exactly that is.
That is a tough one, and it's tough because I'm coming from that framework too, and I do feel that people who are more spiritual get more experiences.
Yeah, they certainly discuss it.
So it seems as if, like, coming from a scientific point of view, that eventually people who experience all of this amazing kind of magical, miraculous stuff do kind of skew to become more spiritual.
Yeah. This, if you're having an experience, sharing an experience that goes into those realms, I think there's a natural draw to be taken by that, and to expand into that reality. So you learn things, and then your perception expands.
Yeah.
That having been said, if you're coming from more of a scientific, results-oriented state of mind, and you're more decisive and discerning and really concentrating on that so that you are missing out, that also is sort of a portal for other people to gain accessibility to the work that we're doing. Because what you filter, so to speak, are the events that are more obvious or more accessible to those people who have no experience with this whatsoever. So you're more inclined to gather video footage or to verify events like the entire group is seeing. So these things are more, they're more what you need to see if you have zero experience. You're reliant on the scientific method. You're reliant on corroboration of evidence. The deeper you go into this, you can soften up on that to some degree, not letting go of it, but just opening up into experiences that are more subtle and not verifiable. And those are happening too. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into just a rational state of mind. I've had plenty of experiences that are very subtle, very intuitive, and very real in that way of reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of CE-5, is that it appeals to such a wide range of people.
Yeah.
And that you can be a total scientist, being that, like, open-minded and skeptical person, and totally engage in the process and just have your own filters in terms of what you want to accept in your reality and not, and still get incredible experiences.
Absolutely. And all of those pieces of the group are fundamentally important pieces. They really all come together, and that is because that's the larger point. All of us coming together in unity is the greater point.
It is. That is the greater point.
It is. So yes. CE-5 is a practice of that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. An integration of realities.
Yeah.
Awesome. Those are great experiences. Thank you for sharing them.
They've been a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cut.